tough on crime policies, and mass incarceration. Since the 1970s, the United States has experienced a rise in crime rates that led its citizens and politicians to push for tougher on crime policies. These policies include laws that stiffen criminal codes and make way for extended prison sentences. By putting into practice longer sentences and mandatory minimum sentences, a lot of problems were created that essentially led to more incarceration. Because such a large amount of people is being incarcerated, not everybody receives adequate legal counsel, and non-violent, low-income individuals who are unable to post bail are kept behind bars for an unnecessary amount of time. Overcrowding in prisons raises a concern for inmates' basic constitutional rights and takes away resources that could be better allocated. In addition, studies have shown that longer prison sentences do not deter crime. The United States incarcerates more people than any other country in the world, housing 25% of the world's prison population, but is only home to 5% of the world's population. Incarceration rates in the United States have quadrupled since the 1970s. In the year of 1995, the overall incarceration rate for the United States was 600 per 100,000. Compared to other countries, this number is outrageous. In South Africa, incarceration rates were at 368 per 100,000. Japan was at 36, and Spain and the United Kingdom were roughly in the 100s per 100,000. In 2011, the United States incarceration rates were still at 716 per 100,000, while countries like the United Kingdom and Spain maintained significantly lower rates at 148 and 143 per 100,000. Some pre-existing policies and laws that are affecting mass incarceration include the three strikes laws, truth in sentencing, and determinate sentencing. The three strikes law is one of the many sentencing reforms that was enacted between the 1970s and 1990s. Originating with the state of Washington, 24 states have adopted this law. Assuming that criminals will be too fearful of the punishment to become repeat offenders, the goal of this law was to punish and incapacitate habitual offenders, ultimately reducing crime rates. However, there is little evidence that this law has a real deterrent effect or is effective in reducing violent crime rates. A study tested the theory that the three strikes law might actually increase homicide rates. This is because non-lethal felonies could turn into homicides to avoid leaving any witnesses behind that could place the criminal under second or third strike. Findings revealed that short-term, three strikes law would increase homicide rates by 10 to 12% and long-term by 23 to 29%. This implies additional homicides in about 0.15% of non-violent crimes. Without the three strikes law, predicted homicide rates would be reduced by 17%, which again places the law with minimal evidence of its positive impact to reduce violent crime rates through deterrence and incapacitation. Another study that used simulation models of the California criminal justice system tested two different scenarios up to the year 2030. One in which the three strikes law is fully implemented, and one in which it's only applied to dangerous offenders. Findings showed that with the first scenario, the amount of dangerous offenders within the prison population would only increase by 2.5%, which is not significant. And for the second scenario, the prison population for dangerous offenders would increase by 3.9%, which is better. The study also found that the law disproportionately affects non-violent drug offenders, and it predicted the prison population to nearly double again by the year of 2030. Another sentencing reform that was passed with the idea of getting tougher on crime and is aiding the overcrowding of prisons is the truth in sentencing law. Like three strikes law, there's 24 states that have adopted this law. Truth in sentencing requires offenders to serve at least 85% of their prison sentences. This law essentially takes away the discretion of parole boards and judges, and in a way can deem a prisoner to stay in prison longer than they may need to be considered rehabilitated. An analysis of the truth in sentencing law on crime rates found that on one hand, it can reduce murders, aggravated assault, and robberies but on the other hand, it can increase property crime rates. Findings also confirm that truth in sentencing laws increase the maximum imposed prison sentences. Thus, this law has some benefits and some disadvantages. Disadvantage being the overcrowding of prisons due to the increase of maximum imposed sentences. The last sentencing reform that I will be discussing is determinate sentencing, which sets a prison sentence with a fixed amount of time as opposed to indeterminate sentencing, which sets a range of time. Determinate sentences also remove discretion from parole boards. The goal of determinate sentencing, like most other fixed sentencing reforms, is to assure that convicted felons receive a reasonably assumed sentence depending on the crime they committed. Both determinate sentencing and truth in sentencing policies share similar projected effects of prison growth, and the main difference between the two is that determinate sentencing has a system that does not include parole boards at all. Although determinate sentencing can have positive impact because it makes sentences consistent and perhaps give the public a sense of fairness, this form of sentencing also removes any discretion for a judge to consider mitigation circumstances. Therefore, if an individual is convicted of a crime under determinate sentencing, all hopes for a less harsh or shorter sentence because of extenuating circumstances are lost. Recommendations to improve the criminal justice system, improve sentencing reforms, and essentially reduce incarceration rates in the United States include implementing evidence-based programs such as drug treatments in prisons, vocational education in prisons, functional family therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and aggression replacement therapies, amongst others, that can reduce the likeliness of recidivism, as well as preventive programs like pre-K education for low-income children and programs in which a registered nurse performs home visits for first-time mothers like the Nurse Family Partnership Program. Rehabilitation has also been strongly linked with lowering recidivism rates. It has been found that inmates that were rehabilitated while in prison had better chances of living a crime-free life. Lastly, following the Smart on Crime initiative is a good place to start when it comes to ending mass incarceration. This initiative is centered on 5 principles. Number 1, prioritizing prosecution to focus on most serious cases. Number 2, reform sentencing to eliminate unfair disparities and reduce overburdened prisons. Number 3, pursuing alternatives to incarceration for low-level, non-violent crimes. Number 4, improve reentry to curb repeat offenses and re-victimization. Number 5, surge resources to violence prevention and protecting most vulnerable populations. Thank you.